Okay.
I'd like to propose two changes to the agenda. The first is that we have Chief Schrage from AFD joining us tonight, and I'd like to see if we could bump him up to the top of our reports, just out of respect and for his schedule. And then also on our current agenda, we have Inlet View School Traffic Study under old business. Brad Coy let the executive board know that he is not going to be able to present tonight because the traffic study is not finished. What I'd like to do is I'd like to swap that out. Right now, under old business, item number 3, we have the item about the R2 amendments, the height and bulk amendment, and we have Tomash and Elizabeth Appleby listed. But really, that's going to be Tomash and Tom. And then Elizabeth wanted to speak about the parking and site access amendment. So we got a couple different Title 21 things going on. And Tom Davis, he wanted to speak more to the R2 height and bulk amendments, whereas Elizabeth wanted to present about, or at least answer questions about the parking and site access amendments. So if we could delete the Inlet View School Traffic Study from the agenda, and in its place, talk about the parking and site access amendment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Aye.
And can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the February 24th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Senator Begich, you have
Yes,
the
sir.
floor.
Thank you. Let me turn on my video here. Thank you, John. Just want to update you guys. It's been a crazy month. The governor's forecast has projected an increase of nearly over $3 billion in revenue to the state because of the tragedy in Ukraine, which has kicked the price of oil within the $100 range. We actually have two different budget approaches with that. The governor is projecting a $91 budget for this year and a $101 budget for the following year. The Senate Finance Committee has taken a more prudent review in their budgeting and are looking at what's called a budgeting process that's based on $80 per barrel price, which just is a little bit more conservative modeling. There's a lot of increase in there. There's been some concern that because of the fluctuations of the stock market, that the permanent fund value has slipped, but actually it's quite stable, over and above $80 billion. And so that percent of market value earnings, that 5% that goes to both dividend and state government operations now, is looking to be relatively stable in and around the $4 billion range. I know those are a lot of numbers, but what it comes down to is this: we have excess funds. So somewhere between 17 and $19 billion is going to be basically earnings reserve, money left over from the earnings of the permanent fund that has not been spent or earned, and that has been earned, and then additional revenue. So we have that much on the table above sort of government expenditures. We have the 3.7 billion coming in now from the federal government. We have an additional $500 million left over from the ARPA money. So the bipartisan money is the bipartisan infrastructure bill is 3.7, $500 million left over, 450 million left over from the American Recovery Act. So there's also other little bits and pieces out there. I'm telling you all that just to give you a framework of where we are with the budget. And John, I'll be quick. I just want you to know that framework. And then know that the goal is really to try to come up with some kind of a basic fiscal plan for when this oil price falls again, and to do so in a way that ensures that we have structural stability. We've been running with an unstable budget, roughly deficits of about 600 million on the books for each year because of the collapse of oil revenue over the past number of years. And the increase of the permanent fund value has not been able to offset that. So just knowing that, it's still our hope, and my caucus, myself, are still taking a lead in trying to come up with a formula for the dividend and the use of permanent fund earnings alongside some new revenue that's probably going to be made up from the oil and gas tax credits, which we currently give to oil and gas companies in Alaska, and some adjustments to the S Corp, the oil and gas S Corp exemption that exists right now for Hill Corp. If we do these two things, we are likely to end up with a stable fiscal plan, and I think there's support for it. So that's the budgeting picture. We are actively engaged on the operating budget and the capital budget, the caucus is, I am, in negotiating our percentage of that, our projects, our priorities for that. And so just know that we're playing an active role. We aren't playing a diminished role. Setting that aside, on just a couple pieces of legislation, one I want to bring up is I've been fighting for 5.5 years for early education and a reading bill, combination of the two. That's stalled in both the Senate Finance Committee and the House Education Committee. That bill has majority support in both bodies on the floor, but it can't get it out of those committees right now. I'm working on it. If it does happen, it would probably be transformative for education in the state of Alaska. I can answer questions about that if people have them. I also do a regular briefing on education issues. If anybody's interested in those, you can get a hold of me in my office and I'll clue you into those briefings. Beyond that, I don't really think I want to take any more of your time. Well, I guess one other thing, campaign finance reform, we are working on it. The House passed a bill that at least puts some limits. Right now, it's unlimited, the amount of money for non-federal races that can be spent and raised in the state Senate, state House, Assembly races, etc. The Representative Schraggy's bill, which passed over and is now in only one committee of referral on the Senate side, would at least set limits of about $2,000, plus some other stair-step limits. But I've been told the governor will likely veto that bill. Nonetheless, we should pass it because it's a good thing for us to do as far as the public goes. Those are all those pieces. April 1st, we'll have a new reapportionment decision by the Supreme Court, and then finally the special election for the passing of the late Congressman Don Young, and I do want to say a word about that at the very end of this, but that election filing deadline, if you're planning to run for the United States House, is April 1st. The funeral for Representative Young will be at the Baptist Temple, 11 a.m. on April 2nd. There's an RSVP, so you're going to have to contact my office if you want to know about that in more detail. And then the election for the primary of the special election will be June 11th, and it will be like Anchorage's ballot. It'll be an all-mail statewide ballot, so mailing ballot statewide. That's the primary, and it's an open primary. So anybody runs, top 4 vote getters will go to a general election, special election, for what's left of Congressman Young's term, and that special election will be held the same day as our primary. So the same day as our primary, we will have the special general election, ranked choice election, top 4 vote getters from the primary on June 11th, and you'll select your temporary congressman or congresswoman. On the same day, you will have an open primary ballot for the regular election, which includes everything, including the full U.S. House seat. And then the general election will happen, of course, in November to select the full U.S. House seat. And that person, whoever is elected, will be sworn in January. The first election, special election, that person will be sworn in September. I think I've covered just about everything I could possibly cover in a short period of time. I'm open for questions.
Any questions?
So I just do this so perfectly, nobody ever has any questions.
Thank you,
Write
Senator.
me if you have questions, and I'll be on for the rest of the day. If you get a question, send it to me in the chat here, and I'll try to answer it.
Senator
Thank you.
Begich.
Oh, yes, Harry.
Hey, two things that I'm tracking, and I think several others might be, is HB 149, and maybe Rep. Fields will talk about that, but also the Child Care Fund. And I'm curious.
You just went on mute,
Sorry,
Harry.
I did that to myself. I'm curious if you have any comments about either of those.
Oh, I support the child care fund. This is, Zach's on, it's his bill, it's his baby, but, the child care fund would effectively provide us the resources to continue to subsidize and support childcare in the state, which we are notoriously bad at doing. So, I mean, I support it. I'm not going to take away the thunder of Rep. Fields. He'll talk about that. I can't remember which one HB 149 is. You know, we have almost 700 bills down here right now. So which one is that one?
Elected
Again, I think Rep. Fields will probably talk about this, but this is giving the childcare sector
The minimum wage.
an
Yeah.
opportunity to work together with the government to affordable quality care.
Yeah. No, I will let him talk about that. I support both of these. He and I have talked about the bills, but those are his bills. So I support both of them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I see Rep. Fields is on, so I'm curious to hear what he has to say.
Go ahead, Representative Fields.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Harry. Yeah, so just segueing into childcare, the Finance Committee last week did report out or pass House Bill 149, which both establishes a sectoral bargaining framework so that childcare providers have a real voice in state policy decisions and state investments of childcare funds. And in coordination with Andy Josephson, the committee amended the bill to authorize a childcare trust fund. There are two ways, so that's authorizing legislation that we have to vote on. I need to get confirmation from 3 more majority members to get that bill on the floor and pass it. I've got commitments from 18 majority members plus Sarah Rasmussen to vote for it. So in terms of capitalizing it with appropriations, there are 2 vehicles. Either you can amend the fiscal note, which would be in the next committee, well, in the next Finance Committee, Senate Finance, or on the floor. And I think which one, whether there's a path for one or the other, in a sense, comes back to the same thing, which is leadership negotiations. So thank you, Tom, for weighing in and supporting capitalization of the Child Care Trust Fund. I think there's a lot of support, and it seems like in the leadership of both chambers for saving some money from this revenue windfall. And my hope is that we save some of it in the form of a child care trust fund, which would produce ongoing benefits for the child care sector and therefore for all working families that depend on child care. So I want to say thanks to Dan Volan for writing a great op-ed about it. Thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for doing a bunch of research to illustrate the need for childcare, and thanks to all the childcare providers who have weighed in on committee after committee to provide public testimony and people about that. And I'm happy to answer questions if people have questions about childcare or that bill. Just adding a little more detail on the budget, the House Finance Committee finished budget amendments today, and I was happy that the Finance Committee, to my shock, honestly, unanimously adopted without objection an amendment that Liz Snyder and I worked on with Andy Josephson to increase 15% funding for wages for long-term care providers. These are home-based providers, and this was an issue that a neighbor of ours, Perry Grover, brought to my attention, that we've had a major decline in inflation-adjusted wages for child care providers. And it took us 2 months to figure out how to write the amendment, but we got it done, and that money is now in the budget, so that's pretty exciting. The budget that is going to be on the House floor next week does pre-fund education, so we would avoid having pink slips next year. It would fund most, if not all, of the school major maintenance projects around the state, which is really important. It funds school bond debt maintenance, and it has some pre-K funding. It is important to pass legislation, like Tom said, to have more expansive pre-K funding. The budget also has more robust funding for human services than we've had in years. We've reduced the IDD, or intellectual developmental disability wait list. I had an amendment in the Finance Subcommittee that increases behavioral health funding by 20%. We increase funding for long-term care providers providing dementia care by 6.5%. So it's a very strong budget in terms of supporting human services, and I'm very excited about that. Tom's on campaign limits bill is very important. Just one note on that. On the House floor, we were able to adopt an amendment that I was involved in that reduces that establishes a cap on the percentage of money that can come from out of state. So if the Senate were to pass the House bill as written, no more than 25% of funding for someone's campaign could come from out of state. One of the problems with unlimited individual contributions right now is that literally a rich person from Texas could cut a single check to someone and finance their House campaign with 100 grand. Very problematic in terms of undue influence. Also wanted to mention in the Energy Committee, the governor introduced a bill to establish a renewable portfolio standard. Great concept in theory. The governor's bill was very half-baked, and Calvin Schrage, who's the chair of the Energy Committee, and I have been rewriting that bill to be a mandatory RPS that is also achievable. I don't want to pass a bill that's unachievable and then have the legislature repeal it a year later, but I do think it's really important to implement a renewable portfolio standard or a clean energy standard. So that's pretty exciting to be able to work on that. And then finally,
I recommend that you look at ours, Zach. Take a look at our bill. We've got one that does that.
great. Thank you, Tom. And in closing, I'm sure everyone's aware elections are going on now. Inlet View is on the school bond. School board members, we have 2 school board members up for election. And the last thing is the Urban Design Commission will return to approval of Inlet View on April 13th. Their first meeting was very bizarre. There are some new members of the UDC who I think don't understand the role of the UDC and delayed decision on Inlet View design. So anyway, I'm gonna come back to town and attend that UDC meeting on April 13th because these are some recent Bronson administration appointees, and it's just very important that that project move forward, assuming voters approve the school bond. So happy to answer any questions.
Zach,
Seeing, are there any questions? Harry?
yeah, John, later in the agenda, I don't know, Tom or Zach, I'm sure you have other pressing needs you need to get to, but I'll be introducing a resolution also kind of asking for some innovation related to housing and homelessness in Anchorage, particularly asking for folks in Juneau to consider an affordable housing trust fund. With some of this windfall we have this year, there's an opportunity for maybe some long-term investment or a shift to the dynamic in the affordable housing sector in Anchorage, which is basically serving the state for affordable housing issues. And so anyways, just want to call your attention to that. And I don't think we'll vote on it tonight, but you know, the time is now to try to figure out creative ways to allocate some of this windfall revenue that we're experiencing this year.
That's a great idea, Harry. And two ideas we've had in the Labor and Commerce Committee. One of them is amend the statute so that AHFC does not have to return its excess revenue back to the general fund, but we reinvest that in affordable housing. That'd be over 30 million a year. We've also drafted a bill, which we've not introduced yet as a committee bill because it's still kind of in stakeholder review, and it would authorize ADA to loan money to localities for broad purposes, whether that's energy efficiency, because there's some good CPACE or commercial property assessed clean energy legislation, but it doesn't really help state and local buildings. So we could amend ADA statutes to authorize them to loan. We would also have to amend their underlying statutes so that they would loan at cost, which would be lower loan rates than are available right now. And those are 2 potential vehicles to expand the supply of affordable housing. And I'd be interested in your feedback on which or both you think is the best to advance, but it's definitely something we've been trying to figure out what we could do to assist from a state perspective.
Anyone else? Daniel, is the chief here?
Sorry, I'm on mute. He is. I saw him, and I know that Chris Constant also has to jump off at 7:30. So
Oh,
why don't we go to Assemblymember Constant and then our fire chief right after that?
Thanks, everyone.
I think that's my cue. So I'll do my best to be brief. And hi, Chief. So first quarter budget revisions are on the horizon. So that is the next major process the Assembly is going to take on. And that's where we true up the budget and we'll be able to really understand the breadth and depth of the amazing level of new positions this administration has created at the executive level, in which we anticipate there are some 30 or 40 new, very well-paid, high-end executives that have to be paid somehow from some part of the budget. And it's the budget process has been kind of a lockbox and very questionable up until now. So, but first quarter always provides great insight because we have a duty that we must balance the budget. So everything has to be on the table. It's like the call of the hand in the poker game. So that'll be the middle of next month. The Muni is investigating a lawsuit against the state on the question of the school funding allocations, the base student allocation, because we believe it's been approximately 7 years that the municipality has been getting basically looted because it's more expensive to deliver education here than it is in some other parts of the state. And the base student allocation is supposed to be based on the number one, where all school districts deviate from, is supposed to be where it's cheapest to educate. And while that may have been true a number of years ago in Anchorage, it's for sure not true now. And we believe it's the Matsu Valley. But it's usually a political decision. The legislature is supposed to authorize this, but there's no political will to do it because these funds are limited in scope. If it comes to us, it has to come from somewhere else. And we're talking about the tune of about $7 million a year that our students are being cheated out of classroom education because of it. And we make a maximum contribution to the school district that's allowed under state law because of that base student allocation. So I anticipate we are going to deepen that conversation and be looking at that. I don't like the idea of suing the state, but at some point, if you do 7 years times $7 million, that's $50 million our kids are being shorted, and that is not an acceptable reality. More close to home, there's an election underway, as you all know, that the ballots are due back by April the 5th. You can drop them at a drop box, you can drop it in the mail, you can take them down to the election center, you can go to City Hall and vote in person, you can go to the library next week and vote there as well. Make sure you vote because your vote is very important to ensure that the city's values reflect our community values and our neighborhood values. I have seen a little bit of opposition to the school bond based on the conversations that have been had in this council. And I'm hopeful that even people who aren't okay with the exact layout of the plan at this time will tell their friends, look, we need to build this school because if we don't get it done this year on through the bond, I just don't know what 2 years from now is going to bring and whether there's going to be political will to move that school forward again. And these kids are going to school in a school that's unsafe and unhealthy, in my opinion. Well, the school district does their best to keep the environment safe. When I hear stories of sewage flowing back up into the classrooms, I feel great concern. So I'm hopeful that members of the community will vote yes on that school. And then we sort out the details as we go forward. That said, the most important thing is you cast your ballot, whichever way you cast it. So there is a new conversation happening, or kind of the next level of the conversation happening on the demobilization of the mass care shelter at the Sullivan Arena. There was a press release that went out last night that was high on rhetoric and low on detail. I had to step away from the negotiated process that I'd served on for the first 8 months of this administration. And now it's Mr. Rivera who's taken my place. So I'm waiting for the report to come out from that group. Every time they meet, they file a report with the body. And they had a meeting yesterday in which a lot of determinations were made. And collectively between the mayor's staff and the assembly's participants, the message last night was, we are on track to demobilize the Sullivan Arena by July 1. I am going to take that with a grain of salt, but hopefully that proves to be true. But that can't be by simply pushing people out into the streets and into our parks, because you all know what that will look like. And in fact, the parks have started to populate again with people from the shelter because it's getting warmer and more comfortable to be outside. And so with that said, we have appropriated funds for camp abatement and cleanup, and we're working a really robust process to get people into supported housing through a very human-centered approach. And so I see some optimism there, and I'm very hopeful that we do achieve it by the 1st of July. But I'm cautiously optimistic, not wholeheartedly optimistic. Finally, the most exciting item I have to report to you at this time is that we have adopted a reapportionment map. I don't know if I can share my screen.
I think,
It looks like I can, so I'm going to pop this map up for everyone to see.
go for it.
Can you see this map?
Yep.
Okay, so our neighborhood now looks like a moose, our district. And so what's changed? We had to grow from about 25,000 to 48,541 or so. And so our district now is Government Hill, downtown, South Addition, this is the creek. And then you have a bit of Spenard, and actually all the way down to I think it's 36th Avenue and C Street, and tucks in around the Fireweed neighborhood. This is where the Chester Creek runs still. And then it cuts up around East Chester and then all the way up to Bar to Turpin and then back. So that is the new district for us as a community. And that was quite a process to get to a map that was acceptable to a majority of the body. And it passed 9-2, and not unanimously. The Midtown folks did not support the map because in some ways their neighborhood being in the center of town always has to give a little bit more in the reconfiguration of the neighborhoods. But the very good news is the next item after that map was adopted, we pushed a resolution forward declaring a special election to fill the new vacant seat on the assembly, which will be held on the 21st of June in a vote by mail capacity, just like all of our other elections are now, which means on June 21st, we select a partner for me, and you all, everyone else, every one of us gets to have a second assembly member now, which is transformational in my opinion for representation. This project started 10 years ago in Fairview with a number of folks who are even in this room now, and it was a dream, an impossible dream. And now it is a pragmatic reality that is coming to you. And so by July, middle of July, we'll have certified that election, and you and I will all be welcoming a new member to the assembly. And so with that, that is my report, and we'll take questions. If there are no questions, I will thank Chief Schrage. Before I go, I learned that the rolling closures of equipment have ended as of yesterday. And that has been a big concern of mine for months. And I'm glad to hear your team is back to full force, Chief. So good night, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Constant.
Did
Is
you
the
want to?
chief here?
Yeah, he is here. I saw him on. There he is. Yep.
Are you waiting for me?
Welcome.
Yes. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to join your meeting this evening. And those last three reports were quite informative, and I appreciate the opportunity to be among those individuals. I am here tonight because I just wanted to update you on a couple of things having to do with Anchorage Fire Department activities. And I'll be respectful of your time, and I'll go as quickly as I can. Please interrupt me if you have any questions. The first item I wanted to share with you is that actually 2 weekends ago, we graduated 26 new firefighters who completed the Anchorage Fire Academy. This was a several month process for training these new firefighter EMTs and paramedics, and they are going through their orientation now, following their initial training, and they will be reporting to the fire stations next week. So 26 new firefighters is good for our community. It is an important part of our overtime mitigation efforts. Having more firefighters reduces the probability of having to call back firefighters on overtime. Assemblymember Constant mentioned just a moment ago that we have discontinued, as of yesterday, our closing of fire apparatus and ambulances, which we've been doing since October 1st. Because we've been inadequately funded for overtime up to this point. And there's a certain amount of overtime that is necessary to staff all of our ambulances and trucks. And so in order to reduce our spending, when our overtime has become excessive, we have just been closing down these rigs. And there was a policy decision made yesterday by Mayor Bronson to discontinue that practice. And we're very happy about that. This is part of the first quarter budget revision effort, which is underway. And so I'm happy to report that all of our stations will be fully staffed every day. So you should feel good about that, because I certainly do. Some of you probably know about our mobile crisis team. This is our emergency response unit that responds to people that are having mental or behavioral crises. These are people who are perhaps ideating suicide, or are lashing out, or having some sort of mental breakdown. And we have a team that is staffed with a social worker, a clinician, and a paramedic. And I said that wrong. It's a clinician and a paramedic. And then we have social worker positions, which follow up on casework. Anyway, it's been hugely successful. It's only funded for half the year for 2022. So I'm pleased to report that we are in the process of entering into a contract with the state. The state has money to support this precise purpose. And so we've entered into a contract that will fund the operation of this team for the balance of this year. So very happy about that. They've been in service for about 184 days. They started in August. They've gone on about 900 responses. The beauty of this team is that more than 3/4 of the patients that they encounter don't have to be transported to a hospital. So by having this team in place, that's 3/4 of 900 some patients that aren't transported to the hospital, because previously that was our only option, to take them to the hospital. So that's good news. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on the 2 bond propositions that we have before the voters right now. And as was mentioned, the ballots are due on April 5th. For the fire department, we have 2. Proposition number 3 is an area-wide proposition to replace 2 ambulances. We normally get about 8 years of life out of each ambulance. We basically run the wheels off these things because they're in service 24 hours a day, every day. The 2 that we're replacing are 2008 units, so they are well past their predicted useful service life. And this total proposition is $300,000. The implication for the Anchorage or the municipality taxpayer is 47 cents per $100,000 of assessed value. The other proposition, number 6, is for residents of the fire service area. So that's just the Anchorage Bowl and Eagle River. It excludes Girdwood and Shubiac, Peters Creek, Eklutna, and Birchwood, Peters Creek, Eklutna, and Shubiac. And this proposition would replace 2 fire engines. One is a 2004 unit and one is a 2008 unit. Typically, these engines have about 10 years of frontline service life. It's $1.1 million to replace them both. The implication for the taxpayer is 45 cents per $100,000. This proposition also includes some minor building retrofits to the old Fire Station 3, which we're no longer using, to repurpose it for light vehicle maintenance. We'll put a lift in there, cabinets and lighting. So that's that. If the voters were to approve both propositions, number 3 and number 6, it would be a total of 92 cents per $100,000. So if you have a $400,000 house, it would be just a little under $4. So that is my report. Again, I appreciate the work that you do, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. And I'll take any questions if there are any. And by the way, I did put my contact information in the chat.
Does anyone have any questions? Harry?
Chief, thanks for coming. I just wanted to applaud the administration's change of course regarding the mobile care team. I recall that initially the administration was inclined to defund or disband that element of the service. And I can tell you, I've personally worked with that team on a neighbor in South Addition who was having a mental health crisis over Halloween. And we created a plan to make sure that some kid dressed like a demon wouldn't be knocking on their door, and they were very helpful in averting what could have been a very, very difficult situation. Anyways, I was very pleased to work with them, and I'm glad that they're going to be a continued resource for the municipality. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yes, Pam. Go ahead. You're on mute, Pam.
All right. Yes, thank you. It is good to hear that we are having care teams or going out. How many transport trucks are operating right now? And are the care teams going out in non-transport vans?
That is a wonderful question. Thank you. They don't do any transporting. So they have 2 cars. They are little SUVs. Maybe you've seen them around town. They are little silver colored cars with the fire department logo on them. We wanted them to have the fire department insignia on it, but we also didn't want it to have the appearance of either a police vehicle or a fire department vehicle, because just the image of a responder arriving on a scene like this can be traumatic for some people. So it purposely has a different image. If the care team determines that a transport is needed, they'll call for an ambulance.
Any more questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Is President Bellamy here?
Oh,
I am.
Don, I think we want to go to the mayor's office next.
Oh, the mayor's office. Okay.
I don't know if we have somebody on from the mayor's office. Maybe not.
Okay.
Go ahead, President Bellamy.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, evening, everybody. It's been a long day. I'd just like to give a few highlights, a few updates. Tomorrow around noon, we will be announcing the 3 finalists for superintendent, along with resumes, photos, other documents that you might find interesting. And in alignment with that, we have the candidates will be visiting Anchorage next week on Monday and Tuesday. On Tuesday night is our community town hall. We're doing several internal and external, but that'll be your opportunity to, and I'll put some information in the chat or post my report in the chat. So you'll have the links that you can just click right on. We're collecting questions in advance of their visit. There are 3 finalists, 1 from Alaska, 1 from Texas, and 1 from Colorado. And so we'll be releasing their names and information tomorrow. And I know that there's lots of questions. People are excited. I'm excited. And so I look forward to getting, the community will have the opportunity to submit questions as well as complete impression forms. And we will use those impression forms in our deliberation after our final interviews with all 3 candidates. And those interviews will take place on Tuesday, right before the town hall. You'll be able to submit your impression forms. It's a Survey Monkey. It'll be on the webpage that I'm gonna put in the chat. You'll be able to submit those until I think end of workday on Wednesday of next week. So please get involved. I think you had we had a conversation about the bond Proposition 1. the Anchorage School District bond. That's been a process, but it's now coming up. It's on the ballot. And I'm sure you've gotten your ballots and you've all already voted. So I'm just secure in that thought. Let's see. We talked about the budget being approved by the Assembly. That was in our last report. So that part is done. Our meetings for this month, for April, will be on the first meeting will be on April 4th. That's the day before elections. So that we always got feedback when we have our meetings on election days. So we moved, that'll be one of those Monday meetings. So this April 4th will be a Monday meeting. And then we'll go back to our regular, our third Tuesday. We encourage you to watch the board meetings. I don't know that we'll have a recommendation for superintendent at that meeting, but certainly by April 19th. And with that, just a couple of highlights on what's continuing. If you have kids or grandkids, Countdown to Kindergarten continues, as well as our spring lottery programs are open. And our graduation dates are already up on the calendar. So with that, I will respond to questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, President Bellamy.
Thank you.
Now it's the president's report, and I'm going to read a couple of things I've written. I don't want to make any missteps today. I have some sad news to announce. Patrice Parker recently resigned from the executive board. Patrice was secretary for the board, and I want to thank her for all her efforts in transcribing the minutes for the community council meetings. I also want to thank her for her contributions and insights to issues facing South Edition. I am pleased to announce that Ruth Ann Jennings has been appointed to the board with the full support of all members of the executive committee. Ruth Ann Jennings has served as secretary in the past and will assume the responsibilities of secretary until the board elections in June. Welcome, Ruth, back to the board. I appreciate your willingness to step forward and fill this critical position on the board. We had some questions and some comments about the latest Urban Design Commission meeting on March 9th, and I'm going to read the comments that I have on that meeting. The Anchorage School District petitioned the Urban Design Committee for review and approval of the site plan for the new Inlet View Elementary School. Approval is required for the project to proceed. The Urban Design Commission held a public hearing on the site plan review on March 9th at the SACC Library. The hearing was open to the public, and the commission received both written testimony and in-person testimony on the case. The meeting was a hybrid format in that some of the commissioners were in the chamber and some participated remotely by telephone. The meeting was very long, like about 5 hours. I have watched the video 3 times and am still not exactly sure what happened. For those of you who have time, a link to the meeting is being posted to the chat. The Urban Design Commission operates under the auspices of the Anchorage Planning Department. The executive board had invited members of the planning staff to the community council meeting for tonight to speak to the meeting and clear up any confusions. I spoke to David Whitfield, the planning manager with oversight of the Urban Design Commission. He explained to me that members of the planning department are not in a position to comment on the proceedings or the outcome of the public hearing, as no decision has yet been made in this case. The chair of the Urban Design Committee the chair of the Urban Design Committee said that the public testimony is now closed. It is unclear to me if this will be reopened. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 13th. I was saddened, though, by a comment made by the chair of the Urban Design Commission. She commented that the South Edition Community Council meeting was not a proper venue for the presentation and discussion of the Inlet View Elementary School design. A lot of effort has gone into facilitating the presentations of the Anchorage School District. I especially want to thank Daniel Volan for his skills and efforts at creating a forum for thoughtful conversations on this school design. And I want to go on to another topic, which is the R2 amendments to Title 21. The R2 amendments to Title 21 is a project that started in June of 2018. And there were open houses, there were discussions, there were publications throughout September and December of 2018. And in 2019, it was opened up for public discussion, public comments, written comments. And there was a March 4th, 2019 public and zoning hearing on these amendments to Title 21. They accepted written comments. There was public participation at that meeting and public presentations. And at the end of that meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission sent the Title 21 amendments back to the Planning Department because they saw that there was so much interest and questions about the impacts of those amendments. And South Edition has responded various times to these amendments. A planning committee responded in October of 2018 with written comments. At the March 4th, 2019 public hearing, there were numerous residents from South Edition who gave public testimony. There was written testimony and also public presentations. In March of 2019, the Community Council passed a resolution on the R2 amendments. And just this month, we responded again. We are under very tight timeframes to respond to some of these requests from the Planning Department. And the Executive Committee approved a letter to the Planning Department on our concerns about the R2 amendments. And that's been posted to our website for so you can read it. And I also want to thank Tomas Deak for always helping us with these responses. This is technical code changes, and the average person like me find it very difficult to understand, but he's able to present it in a way where we understand the implications, and he's able to write the responses that reflect the values of the community. And this particular response has to do with how the public process will proceed if there are variances to these Title 21 changes. And I encourage everyone to read the letter. It's on our website. And I want to thank Tomas again for all his work in getting this these proposals turned around very quickly to the Planning Department. That's all I have. And Daniel, you have the floor.
Yeah, the only announcement I have is that Solid Waste Services is doing the curbside composting program again. So you can go to muni.org/SWS. And I posted about that on our South Edition Community Council Facebook as well, some information. But yeah, if you go to that website in the top right corner, there'll be information. You can click curbside compost and find out more about that, how to dispose of your organics and your yard waste. Thanks.
Ruth Ann, do you have any report from the Community Federation, your other job?
No, I do not. I apologize.
Okay,
I do
no
not have a
problem.
report.
Kathleen, do you have a report?
My report would be that the February financials have been uploaded to the South Edition Community Council website. You can find it on the FCC website. And I would entertain questions about that, or if anybody wants to, I guess if anybody wants to actually email me questions, I can put my my email in the chat. But other than that, I'm done.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Mhm.
Sheila informed me late this afternoon she's not feeling well, so she will not be participating this evening. Now we can go on to old business. Hans Thompson, you have the floor for the Breeze Law Memorial update.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. The project managers for this came to us last June and asked for volunteers for their advisory group. Myself and 3 other community members joined. That would be Pam Tashi, Tom Begich, and a young lady that goes by Izzy that lives in the neighborhood. This was the first of 3 community outreach presentations for feedback for the advisory group. We told the planners making the presentation that we would like to go to the community council first to provide feedback and then reach out to them before we do the next meeting. The project itself is really about what improvements can be made along the pedestrian path between 9th and 10th Avenue along G Street. So that part of the park strip that connects 9th and 10th Avenue. Before the meeting ended, the 4 of us agreed to work out what we wanted to say to the community council via a group email, but we couldn't hear back from Izzy. So the 3 of us, Tom, Pam, and myself, kind of came to a consensus on kind of what we wanted to say. And really, the consensus that we came to on this kind of new improvement area is that we want it to be unnamed. We felt that the plaza on 10th Avenue is not needed. The 9th Avenue Plaza would be a single wonderful place to recognize and provide reflection space to both historic indigenous lands and people. With it being close to the Denina Center, there's a nice tie-in there. And also to our current culture through words and art. And that we would save like the south end for just simple gardening, gardens and seeding. And we believe this would save significant money on construction and maintenance. After the next 2 more advisory group meetings, taking in our feedback and revising the plan, the project managers will likely go to the Urban Design Commission for approval. Does anyone have any questions, or group members, Pam and Tom, if I missed something, please speak up.
That was well said, Hans. It's a good description of what happened, and it's our hope that they will actually pay attention to our recommendations, and that's what we'll be fighting for.
Pam, you're on mute.
And I just want to emphasize that at this time, we recognize that it is inappropriate for it to be that plaza to be have any individual's name attached, whether it's through a naming process or through a memorial. Because so anyway, we are, I just want to emphasize, it is not Breeze Plaza that we're talking about. It is a plaza, and that's all. So
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, so I would really support the direction it sounds like we're going, because we worked hard to keep that park strip open and I don't know, unnamed, I guess. We have significant memorials for significant actions or activities that have occurred on that park strip, but we worked really hard to make it an open space and keep it unnamed. I would really support the effort that we move towards not having any specific individual's name attached to the plazas or the pedestrian pathways.
So I'm going to just interject here to say that we have crafted the direction to move it away from anything like that, because we're focusing on what the parameters are. And I think that Hans really laid it out there. I would really want to emphasize we should be looking forward, not back. We need to be looking to what we as a community council, this is my community council too, what we as a community council want to see, and what I think we've identified erases those earlier discussions and earlier issues and really plants a more optimistic and forward vision for what that can be. And I think Hans really articulated, and I'd like, if maybe as an indulgence to me, to focus on what we want to see there, not anything from the past, but our positive vision for what we want to do, because I think that will win the day. And that's what I would like us to do as a community council. And I think Hans really articulated it very well.
Yep, I hear that I hear that and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the work that you guys are doing on this as well.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? I can't see everyone. Um,
I think that's it, Hans. Thanks very much. Is Elizabeth going to be our next speaker, Daniel?
If she's on, yes. I don't see Elizabeth. I do see Tom Davis.
Maybe I should start since that's the topic we're going to talk about, right?
Sure, go right ahead, Tomas.
So thank you, everyone, and good to see everybody. So the two issues we wanted to discuss, and that's why the agenda change happened, the slide agenda change happened, because we have Tom Davis on the line and probably in a square soon. Here is the square, and it's a rectangle. So Tom is going to help us to deal with the discussion, so we can move on to two issues. One is the R2 process, which John actually alluded to earlier in some detail about the process. And the other one is what's called the parking amendments, which is also a project from the planning department to amend the current parking regulations completely in a fairly big project to allow for a more layered approach to look at demand and allow developments to happen and not under or over park projects. Try to hone in the planning with the design. So let's start with the R2. So that's a little bit easier. As you heard previously, that project has gone to the assembly. And actually yesterday, if you guys want to have fun watching videos, that was a fun one too, because after all this work, there was a delay on the decision. There was a request to postpone to April on the basis of more input from Midtown community councils. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but that will allow us for another at least a few weeks to contemplate how we want to address the assembly about the issues we have raised. I would like to put it forward in the statement that after, Tom, I think it's been 4 years or 3, but quite a few years, we have worked on these issues and they are highly technical. But the issue was about how do you write a planning code in a way that you actually foster development, but do it in a way that the community's character doesn't change in a detrimental fashion. So with all that long process being completed, we had stated 2 remaining concerns, and we had stated that to not just in the letter you see on the posted last week, but also to the assembly in hopes that they would look at those 2 issues. And the first issue is about process. As you well know, the community has come up in a fairly serious and forceful manner, because some developments were allowed to happen in a way that the administrative reviews allowed arrangements, which then certainly didn't make a very good impression on the projects being developed. And the concern we have still is that one of the ways to do administrative reviews is still in the code, and it is more of a technical issue in process rather than a design issue. The request is that we would like to have that one issue still to become a public process rather than an administrative process until things settle down. I think that's the right path. That has not made it to the assembly version. Currently, it's not in it. So that is something I would encourage you to read and see if you can support it and reach out to the assembly members. And the other issue is about an adjacency issue, which has to do with the by right allowance of 3-story buildings versus the 2.5-story buildings, which is currently in code. So we propose that it would make a lot of sense to allow those developments to come in with assembling land in a way that you don't have one smaller building next to a larger one, which then becomes incompatible, and then the conflicts start to arise. And the exemptions in the current code talk about a half-acre size. We propose that we should go into a full, well, it's not a full acre, basically a half a block, which is surrounded by 3 streets and an alley, which is the pattern of South Addition in terms of platting. And we should allow by right development rights for an area that size. So the impacts on neighbors are much different than a half-acre size, which would basically be 3 or 4 lots with 1 or 2 adjacent lots being still under the old rules of 2.5. So that is why we have written the letter. And then I have Tom here, and he'll probably chime in to tell me or tell us, I guess. But first of all, tell me whether it makes sense to look at the process of how we're gonna be able to reach out to the assembly, because he was there yesterday and he acknowledged the delay of 1 month. So maybe he can speak to the process first and then those 2 issues after. So thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tomas. The assembly postponed their deliberations to, I think, April 22nd. So about a month. The assembly closed the public hearing on the R2 project, and they didn't begin to deliberate on the issues. They simply moved to postpone. One of the assembly members from Midtown had received comments from her constituents. Apparently that their community council needed more time to understand the ordinance and its effects. And so that assembly member moved to postpone to April 26th. I wasn't really clear. I'm still not quite clear what exactly their process is going forward. It may be that they decide to refer this to their committee on community and economic and community development. I know the acronym CEDC. It's John Weddleton's committee for discussion, but I don't have any confirmation of that. When I learn when John Weddleton's Community Economic Development Committee of the Assembly plans, whether they plan to discuss this in one of their meetings, I'll post that on the project webpage, and I'll send an email to the Community Council and Executive Committee and Tomas. I don't know what other formal process they have for submitting comments, but it might just be folks contacting individual assembly members, as I think that people can do. And that's what I know so far. So probably not as much as you wanted me to be able to inform you about, but.
Thank you, Tanda. Let me jump in back for one note, and that is, I did not say that, and I should have started with that. When I say that there were two items remaining on the list, I said that because there were a lot more when we started. So all the kudos have to go to the planning department, that after all this time, they managed to work with all the different stakeholders and come up with a fairly complex code, but at the same time, one which was embraced by, I believe, embraced at least with a go-ahead embrace from all stakeholders. And the remaining issues are much less crucial, but I think crucial enough to raise them. So that's why we did, and we have discussed them in our planning group and among XCOM. But the point is that there was a tremendous improvement in this code. I think South Addition came out in a way that will help to protect its character. So big thanks go out for the planning department for that work. So, but I think what we want to do is definitely we're going to open it up for questions on this topic, and we go to the parking amendment second. But Tom is a resource we can work with, and if you have questions, let's start with those. I don't see anyone, Daniel, do you?
I do not.
Okay, then thank you. And that means that this public hearing is scheduled in April. As Tom alluded to, we don't know the process yet of how that discussion will take place, in what forum, their deliberations at the Assembly. And I encourage you to look at the information we put out, and definitely look at the website and see if you have any interest in participating, or if you don't agree, obviously that's another issue. You have to raise that, but please pay attention to this if you are interested in planning. Now, then I think we can move on to the parking amendments project. And what I'll do is quickly note a opening statement, which is I reviewed 85 pages of code, which had some changes on it. So I think that's a new world record and almost broke my back too. So I'm sure it is probably fairly significantly big effort for the planning department to put it forward. This project is in the draft, public draft for P&Z, Planning and Zoning Commission. This is the public hearing draft for that. So we are in the position to comment on the current version of it. And based on the feedback I got from the planning committee, and I believe for probably gonna get it from all of you, I think it would be probably beneficial to have another discussion with Tom leading us through the major points of this ordinance. And I can speak to a certain points which are relevant to South Edition and perhaps more relevant for us to discuss. But I think it would be helpful to set a date before this hearing to actually have a kind of a work group or workshop, so the planning department can help us to understand some of the details of this code change. And if there is interest in that, we'll set it up. Tom committed to that, and we'll organize it, and then hopefully we can educate everybody about where this code is heading. So I don't know if Daniel, if you wanna maybe let's see if there is interest, like maybe your hands raised or something, so we know that people are interested to do this first of all.
There's one.
As he said. Okay, a few people, 4 or 5. So we would have probably about a half a dozen folks right now, it seems. And I believe what we'll do, if I don't know, Tom, can you state what would work for you? First of all, this is probably going to be during a daytime. Is that true, or will be an evening one?
It's up to your participants. We can meet during the day or in the early evening. So it's depends on when folks have time.
All right. Well, generally, I know everybody's working, but since this is going to be a Zoom meeting, is that usually I think Tom usually have these midday meetings for planning, or we can do it in the evenings, but I think the evening is going to be a bit more troublesome. But either way, if you are able to do it, maybe we'll pick an afternoon and advertise it like on a poll. If you could put your interest into the chat so we know who the participants would be, then I could track and we reach out to those folks to try to set up a time which works for everybody.
I'll put it myself.
So while you're doing that, as far as the code changes go, reviewing it, I have to say that again, this is fairly a complicated business in terms of how do you write a code so it covers a very large and very diverse area of the world. Unfortunately, Anchorage is not homogeneous, but our codes tend to look at it that way. So I think the parking amendments made strides in layering it a little bit better. There are new areas of focus for parking reductions and more sensitive ways to look at the demand versus the supply in terms of housing types and the demands for parking with the various housing types. So I think there are really good starts here, and I think it would be worth for us to take a good look at this project and then provide some input from South Edition in a way that it truly sounds like we thought through it and wanna advance this project, but also would wanna represent our interest to preserve our community character, which was always the major issue. So I don't know if Tom, do you want to maybe say a few words of the impetus, and then we'll have this meeting and don't spend too much more time on it, because I think we're going to run out of time here soon.
When South Edition commented on the R2 project 3 years ago, a neighborhood committee took time to not only comment on building heights in the R2, but also named some serious issues of concern to South Edition about the character of new development in terms of driveway widths, what new driveways were doing to the sidewalks, how buildings fronted or related to the street, whether they were front yards or not, things of greater interest to South Edition than maybe some outlying neighborhoods. And also this concern about the need to recognize the unique character of urban neighborhoods. So we could not address those in the R2 project because that was such a narrow project, but we appreciated those comments and the hard work that committee did to put together those written comments and the hard work they continue to do on behalf of South Edition, Tomasz, John Thurber, and the other committee members. So this parking amendment is actually we said we'd get to it through this parking amendment. This parking amendment has to do with not only, how much parking and where the parking is, but also neighborhood character elements. And so we are addressing 3 or 4 comments that South Edition put forward several years ago. We're addressing them now in that parking and site access ordinance. And so we think that South Edition, there probably is if there's a dog in the fight, or there's an interest, I would think, that South Edition have in following this ordinance and how it is coming forward. And there is another community council, 2 others that might possibly be interested in joining the party. 2 other neighborhoods this proposed parking ordinance designates or identifies or recognizes that they're urban. And they have land use committees that are also very interested in following this ordinance. And one of them being Spinard, which is a little different, but they're very interested in understanding what South Edition is thinking, as well as whatever issues they have. And so there was this idea about having several neighborhoods together in a joint work session of the urban neighborhoods. And I don't know if that you all be interested in entertaining that idea. So
I got a nod for everybody, and then you can scold me after. But I think to preserve some resources, that would probably make sense to have a Zoom meeting with the other community councils. We just have to make sure that our focus may be different from where they want to focus. So that's the only issue. But yeah, absolutely. If you can do it, we should do it that way.
Hey, Tom, there's a question in the chat. If you could link the project website. for the parking and site access amendment package. And then Cheryl had a question. Says, please have Tom explain why parking is important in terms of beginning to set the South Addition traditional neighborhood design standards.
Well, parking is sometimes drives how a new home or residence looks, how it kind of fits into the neighborhood, because it can just occupy so much of the site, whether it's the driveway portion or whatnot. And it can really change a neighborhood if it's not located or placed sensitively on the site. And so we are looking to preserve and such aspects of the ordinance having to do with encouraging or requiring, the bigger driveways to be accessed from the back alley rather than taking over the front yard. The amount of parking required can really change the city. So we're taking a hard look at what's the minimum amount of parking we need to quote unquote require of each and every development. And that has to do with, how much parking is being utilized, how much of people really quote unquote need, and to at least just avoid a city code that requires more parking than a typical development needs, because that can really, create cost issues and neighborhood design issues. In fact, a lot of the bulk issues with the bigger buildings that are pushing buildings to 3 stories have to do with accommodating the car. The big garages or the driveways squishing the development into 3 stories. So there are other reasons, of course. So parking is very important to us. If we were as well organized as like a Minneapolis or other city with a great, well-managed on-street parking / snow plowing and great sidewalks, we could go further than we're proposing to go now in terms of really relying more on just on-street parking. And I know South Addition has paid permit parking in parts of its neighborhood that's managed, but we do find that to the extent some cities eliminate minimum parking requirements, but to be able to do that, we really would need to go for even bigger changes in how we manage our streets and on-street parking.
I have a question.
We're not going far.
I don't know if this was already addressed, so forgive me. Sometimes it's hard to track the chat and make sure people are, I'm paying attention to them and also listen to every detail. But one of I think Tomasz sent you our sort of draft comments on the parking amendments. And one of the things was the traditional urban neighborhood versus the edge urban neighborhood in that Westchester Lagoon area and around Inlet View. What was sort of the rationale for separating that, making that different than the rest of South Addition?
Yeah, so we've looked at the city, and there are these neighborhoods like the core of South Addition and parts of Government Hill and Fairview that have this strong alley gridiron street grid. It's pretty regular sidewalks. And so there are other areas that also have a great street network like Spenard or Airport Heights that aren't quite, that original neighborhood look. And there are parts of when you get way out the west end of South Addition, its form, its streets, maybe lack of alleys becomes more and more like that edge urban. And it was very difficult for us to determine there's no clear boundary here. And so I read that letter and I appreciate it. I'm glad that South Edition, for one, is looking critically on that draft map and making some comments. And we're going to be all ears on that. I think would be quite deferential to suggested adjustments to that. You know your neighborhood, so so we can definitely adjust that map. And there were some other great observations that I thought on that initial letter. So I appreciated that.
Looks like Pam has a question.
Oh, on that parking, when you differentiate between those two, because yes, I mean, as you walk through South Edition, you definitely see over by Inlet View School, no sidewalks, and it's like almost suburban. Are you doing that with overlay zoning?
You know, we are not. An overlay zone is like a floating zoning district, and you have to rezone into it, and it might allow different land uses. It might complete the really where we're placing these maps or proposing to place them is really in the part of Title 21 that is just about design, physical design. And its purpose is really to help tailor Title 21 design, how does the site look, feel, relate to the street type stuff? How to allow Title 21 to tailor its standards for the physical design, the parking, the landscaping, the driveways to the needs of different types of neighborhoods. And so we're putting those maps right in that section of Title 21. And all they're doing is helping direct that, this neighborhood will have, stronger standards for driveways or whatnot. And that neighborhood is, cul-de-sac area. And so the maps are really more a part of our design chapter. They're just proposed to be burned right into the code. And we also intend to make them available zoom in version that you can view, zoom in and see. But as they are, they're designed to be easy to read, hopefully. No overlay zoning. Nothing proposed anyway. Not a part of this ordinance. Yeah, we noticed that too out of West South Edition. It just has a, it's a bit different urban pattern there. At some point it begins to break up a bit. And so that was our thinking behind the edge urban, as opposed to the traditional urban out there.
So Tom, thank you. And one thing I did not want to do today is dive into those issues which you referenced. So I'm really apologize for many of you who probably doesn't know what maps we're talking about. I think it would be very beneficial, especially for the interested community members here to participate, and let's have this discussion. Let's listen to Tom and let's see what is coming. I would request that if you could, and if you don't mind, to share your email so we can contact you. That would help a little bit to organize this. So if you just put it in the chat, we probably have many of yours, but we may not. So if you could please do that, then we can reach out to you to organize the meeting. But ultimately, what I want to emphasize again is that just like Tom mentioned, this code amendment seems to look at something in a little bit different manner, which generally is done with different tools. And what Tom is looking at for the proposal is that we are looking at the municipal areas, regardless of zoning, being a pattern in different ways. Therefore, we should be able to look at parking in those patterns in different manners. So one of the proposals is that similar patterns like South Edition exist in Mountain View and in Fairview, but because of the economics and the demographics, Fairview actually has a proposal where the by right parking is reduced by a larger, greater number or greater extent than allowed in other places. That would foster development because the parking demand wouldn't be so high, but there also would be a comparable, reasonable assumption that the number of cars would be also less. They do the math, I don't, but it has some logic. So I think we should listen to them and let's have a dialogue, and then we can have more informed decisions on how we're gonna respond. But we'll reach out to everybody to arrange the meeting. So that's pretty much all I got, Daniel and John.
Great. Then Renu, I think I saw you raise your hand. Will you put your email in the chat so we have you too? We can make sure you're included.
Thank you, Tomas. Harry, would you like to go ahead with your proposed affordable housing trust fund resolution?
Thank you. Yeah, the intent here is to lay a resolution on the table for our consideration and passage at our next community council meeting. This comes from several years of discussion, including actually began when I was serving on a coalition related to affordable housing and homelessness that the municipality put together. And that must have been like 2017 or so. And I was the chair of the Fairview Community Council, and they invited me to come and share our experience, since it's in our backyard, and it's in our backyard here in South Addition too. And at that time, it was apparent that the status quo was very strong in this city, that the funding mechanisms and the players that are involved in this conversation are well established and are well funded, and are not terribly inclined to make any radical adjustments to the status quo, considering at the time and until recently, decreasing available resources that could be addressed to this. Even tonight, several flash forward, 5 years, and tonight we've heard about a transition at the Sullivan Arena, seen in the paper proposal to create the mayor's going to erect a 330 person venue for housing chronic homelessness. We have historically low volume of houses on the market. We have historically high average home price. We have a decreasing average home income in the city, and we have a historically low vacancy rate for rentals, which are largely buoyed by, which are significantly buoyed, not largely, but significantly buoyed by federal rental grants, which are about to expire. We have a catastrophe on our hands in this city related to affordable housing. And it's not just us. We are shouldering a burden for all of the unincorporated areas of the state that have a housing problem, and people end up coming here to try to find a solution to their personal housing problem. Meanwhile, the state is allowing this to happen and allowing the municipality to shoulder that burden for everybody else. We heard about from the fire chief tonight about overtime rates related to the fire department serving this crisis that's occurring. And so what this proposal is to just create a bucket. I don't think we need to know exactly how this bucket will be administered at this time. But our ask is for the municipality to have a bucket that they can create innovation in affordable housing. They can create innovation in addressing the problems related to or the causes of chronic homelessness. That they can bring parties together, create new funding mechanisms, and shift the current status quo, shift the paradigm related to housing in our community. What's urgent about this, and why I'm showing this to you now as opposed to last year or whenever we drafted this concept paper in 2019, why I'm showing this to you now is that we just heard Senator Begich talk about billions of revenue, unexpected revenue that's coming into the state. And so I think what we're talking about from the state's perspective is couch change. Tens of thousands of dollars to get something started, maybe a few $100,000 to get something started at the municipality that could be operated on an invested endowment model. The city then could administer that money. The state would be finally, for the first time, really leaning into some of this affordable housing crisis that they have otherwise shirked and allowed the municipality to shoulder. And so that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for we create a bucket, this trust fund that could help us as a municipality lean into this issue. And so you see the concept paper was drafted in 2019. That was before we had this windfall petroleum from petroleum. And so what we were talking about in 2019 was having a special assessment on home sales. I don't know if that's necessary anymore. Maybe we could keep that also and have it be an ongoing fund that could grow over time. But I think now is a really ripe time to be able to, just like the Child Care Trust Fund and some other just critical issues for our community, create a pot of resource for innovation in this area. And that's what I'm proposing with this resolution. It's a very short resolution. You'll see it. It's linked on the South Edition Community Council website. And it's a one-pager. The concept paper is not necessarily related to it, but it does kind of provide a little bit more of my thought going into it and the thought we had in Fairview at the time. So I'd encourage you to read it, and I'd love some discussion on it. Feel free to reach out to me if there's improvements in this, or if there's something about it you just hate. I'd be happy to chat about that either tonight or offline over the course of the next month. And I do hope that we could bring a version of that resolution back past it. I suspect Fairview will do the same. And Christopher Constant has already said that he would be excited to advance that at the assembly so that the assembly would have buy-in on this. And I've also brought this to Senator Begich's staff and Senator Begich's attention. So we may be able to at least make a little bit of forward progress on this chronic issue. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Any questions?
Yeah, I actually have a lot of questions. I think this is a great idea. It's definitely, we have a big need for it. It's interesting that this was, your concept paper was drafted in 2019. I've got a lot of comments and questions about it. Obviously, it needs to be brought up to date, but Alaska is a non-disclosure state, so you're not required to tell or disclose what your house was bought or sold for. So that would have to be changed. I imagine it would have to be made into some sort of statute in order for this to go through. And you're calling it a fee, but it kind of sounds like a tax. So would we get to vote on it? How would that work? It would raise prices for people. So my guess is that home prices it would raise fees for people in mortgages. So my guess is they would just raise the price of their homes to pay for that extra fee or tax or whatever you want to call it. So then I think that the trickle down on that, it would make homes less affordable for people who are trying to get into some of them. It sounds like the burden would be on the seller, not on the, or not evenly split. How is that going to be? Would seniors be exempt there? I think that a lot of seniors, myself included, really are at the point where, they're trying to downsize and get into smaller places and thinking of selling their homes. And then they'd have an added fee on top of whatever they would have to pay in, their closing fees. But then also, I understand that the Alaska Community Foundation has created a special fund already to address this. And the fund has been created to pool resources in order to, make some acquisitions. And they've already started to do that. I believe I believe one of the things that you had addressed in your concept paper was an on-site professional, or, buying a place, a cooperative housing with on-site professional counseling and treatment. And I believe that's already in the process, that's a place is being bought for that. And I also understand that the somebody from the Community Foundation has already presented an idea for a possible trust fund. Is that part of the, is that, are you working with them? Is your idea separate from what they're doing? So anyway, those are just some of the thoughts and that I'd like to see addressed before, this goes forward. Thanks, Harry. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Fran. John, if I may.
Sure, please go ahead.
So that the concept paper drafted in 2019 was under a different sort of paradigm than what we are currently experiencing. I think what we have now, what the resolution is proposing, is a state assessment to create this trust fund. The Community Foundation's fund related to this is, my understanding is it's a donor advised fund. I don't know what the situation is related to who administers the funds or to what agencies they are already aligned with. I do also think that is largely tied to private philanthropy, so it may have great potential, and there may be an amazing funder out there, but likely not as impactful as the multi-billionaire funder of the state could be right now. And so I guess what I'm proposing here is a state grant to a municipal fund that could work in coordination with, or could be aligned directly with the Community Foundation, but would be basically getting the state and the municipality to also ante in on this potential confluence of funding. So I think that the concept paper you're seeing again in 2019, I wouldn't put too much reliance upon the proposals there. It was that was purely under the paradigm where we did not have billions of additional revenue from the state. How else could this be funded? How have other communities funded it? I don't think we need to go down a changing statute related to disclosure, but we could if we were committed to this as a community.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Harry.
Thank you.
Now we're open for community comments, 3 minutes each. Anyone can voice their comments.
John, I think either Martin or Cheryl would like to talk about the Transportation Committee.
Martin, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we have one speaker closed off now. Actually, I'm hoping, I just joined the Transportation Committee and I'm finding it pretty interesting, but I was hoping that that Cheryl will actually speak to where we are.
Cheryl, go ahead.
Cheryl, are you still here?
I know that Cheryl's attending and I can see her in the chat, but I think she doesn't have the ability for us to hear her. So what we could consider doing going forward in the next meeting is doing a standing report for the Transportation Committee.
That wasn't. Oh, sorry, I was talking to my wife there. What I've been tasked with doing so far, and I've been doing it, is contacting and thanking our assembly people, and also our Zach Fields and Tom Begich for the help and support that they've given us for working on the AMATs.
Great. I see Jeff has his hand up.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I do have my hand up. Thank you for giving me 3 minutes. I wanted to speak about.
That's really all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you, Bart.
I thought you were done. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. Along those same lines of transportation, everyone knows about the high cost of gasoline today, and I just wanted to give a quick pitch for the People Mover bus system. It's not perfect. You do still have to wear a mask for another month, but yeah, I would recommend you take a trip or two or three, in the next couple of weeks. And I've always said it has two benefits. Not only does it help your pocketbook, but it helps the environment. So that's a quick pitch for People Mover. I don't think gas prices are going down anytime soon. There's a good alternative.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bonnie, can I put Bonnie on the spot? Did you want to talk about the salmon run?
Yeah, sure. I'll be quick. The salmon run is going to be May 7th, and we're starting to solicit volunteers. So if you're not a runner, then you're more than welcome to. I'll put the email of our volunteer coordinator up, and we need volunteers at 9 a.m. on May 7th if anyone wants to help out the community. Or you're welcome to run a 2K, a 5K, or a 10K through South Edition. So, and support Inlet View and the students. So I think that's it. Thanks, Daniel.
I registered for the 10K today, so I'm going to have to start.
It's 2 months. Sorry about that.
Cool. Any other community comments? I don't see.
Daniel.
I have one. I'm sorry. I couldn't find Zoom again once I closed my computer to keep Martin from echoing. I'm Deborah Hanson, and I just wanted to comment about communication because I've been puzzled by this. Paul Burrell about Inlet View School Elementary and the meetings announcements and the public notifications, and he kept saying to go to the Inlet View newsletter for the school. And I've requested numerous times to be included on that. I couldn't get on it. Margot Bellamy finally said, well, we have it on a website. So I went through the website and I went back through most of working backwards into 2020. And I don't see any notices of it until, the first notice I found was this September in 2021 when they said, well, we're on the same site, but they weren't. And then I went through the community council minutes and the same thing. I just didn't see anything about the notices. So if somebody, I feel like I've made a sincere effort to figure out what's going on and I couldn't figure it out. So I just wanted to publicly say I've tried and I couldn't find anything. That's it.
Thank you, Deborah. Anyone else?
Harry.
Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, I just want to call people's attention to the Urban Design Committee meeting on April 13th. I think that those of us that support the design and the process that the Building Design Committee has gone through over the several months and all the community involvement that's occurred over the last several months probably ought to be there. I think that in listening to those 5 hours of meeting, it was clear that they did not account for the overwhelming written comment that was submitted. 44 to 18 were in favor of passing that design. And they also did not account for the very substantial resolution that our neighborhood put together in support of including that Inlet View school on the bond. And so it's not clear whether or not they're going to continue to have any sort of open dialogue, but they did seem to overwhelmingly yield to the people who were very voiceful in the room, albeit the minority of comments that they've received in the overall. So I do think that presence at that meeting, as Rep Fields suggested, would be important for those of us that support the process that's gone to date, and also just for a handful of folks I see on this Zoom that were involved in that Building Design Committee. My thanks to you for your service for the last several months. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
I've got another comment from Cheryl that I want to just pass on from the chat really quick. So she says, the Transportation Committee is seeking help from more of our neighbors to let folks know the benefits of turning the ANC and INL couplets into complete streets. We need a relatively small amount of funding, and it will take political support to get it done. So yeah, maybe that's something we can kind of put effort behind, is how we want to raise awareness for those complete street requests that we've made. I don't see any other hands. Martin, you turned your screen back on. Were you going to say something else?
Oh, no, thanks. But thank you for checking.
And then Harry, you have your hand up again.
I think I want to make sure that in the minutes, it's included, as we did last month in February, that we've invited somebody from the mayor's office to speak, and they did not show. They didn't show in February either.
Alrighty, any other comments? Ruth, you have a thumbs up. Ruth Ann, you just telling me?
Just Harry, it's in the minutes.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, John, I think we.
All right. I think we're closing early tonight. I'm amazed. Thank you, everyone. See you next month.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everybody. Fran, are you going to save the chat too? There's some emails in there I want to.
Yes, I always do.
Perfect. Okay, cool. I'm going to hit end.